She don't really think I'm a crackhead, right? Why would she think I'm a crackhead? Hey, yo, I'm gonna get my lokes up on top. You know, and again, gang.
It's usually a pretty good indicator of crack usage if asking if somebody thinks you're a crack user is then followed by a message that is just incoherent ramblings.
Yo, keep my looks up on top. You see the shoes? I see the money. Yo,
You would get absolutely eaten alive in Compton. Also, my Bible reading is going absolutely astonishingly. I'm about halfway through Genesis and a quarter through the Gospel of Matthew.
it's absolutely wonderful to hear that your Bible reading is going by fast. Is there anything that you've learned or like any unique thing that, I don't know, would be interesting to talk about? Because honestly, I would love to hear it.
God is good.
What about that time when he killed the whole world? I feel like if you were a god, you could find a way to fix your problems without killing everyone except for like a couple people.
God blessed us with life, God blessed us with a body, and the people that were blessed turned against him. They turned away from his word. They began to sin unrepentantly, and God, being the creator of the universe, decided that the best action was, I regret what I've done, and I'm going to erase these people because they're sinning against me, they're sinning against the world, and they're not following the track they're supposed to. He said to Noah that I find you favorable. Please take your family, and please take the wives of your sons and build an ark, for you will lead the new world. And that's exactly what happened. I think that if you create a species like that and they begin to defy you, they begin to act immorally, they begin to pillage each other or not follow your word, they deserve to be killed. And then after that happened, he created a covenant with humanity that he would never do such a thing again, because he's placed the will of the world on Noah's shoulders. And that's pretty much where I left off in the Old Testament. But as it follows, Noah's lineage would then lead the world. Like, for example, if you build a house for a bunch of homeless people and you let them live in it for free, you pay all the taxes, you do all the repairs, you do everything, and then those people turn and they begin to destroy that house, do they not deserve some kind of punishment for it?
And I don't feel like it's right to create a bunch of people with free will and command them to live life specifically how you want them to. I mean, I feel like, see, I don't know the whole story of the Bible. I don't know what the people in, like, before Noah's Ark was doing. They could have been murdering and raping each other, for all I know. But I mean, you give these people free will and command them to live how you want them to, not necessarily how they choose to or how, like, what laws they give themselves. You know, I mean, I feel like if the Bible was the rule of law, I mean, I feel like it would be wrong. I think it'd be wrong. You know, I mean, that's enslavement. You're not giving people a choice. Like, let's just say it was like some of the less agreed upon in the Bible. I'm just going to use this as an example because, of course, I would. Gay marriage. You want to fuck another dude? Boom, you die. You get smite. That's tyranny. I don't think that a righteous ruler would treat people like that. But I mean, I feel like there's a huge difference in the way God acts in the Old Testament and the way he acts in the New Testament. I mean, in the Old Testament, he genocides tons of people and kills tons of people, even outside of Noah's Ark. But in the New Testament, he's a lot more forgiving.
I think it's important to realize that God plays by different rules than we do. God created this universe, and if he believes a certain species to be immoral or to be acting against his word, then it is within his right to change it. Like, I'm sure if you were God and you created a species that you intended to be helpful, community-based, and just generally beneficial for the world, and they turned and they just began to be beasts They just went around murdering each other and raping each other. You wouldn't be happy with it. You'd want them gone, and you'd want to start with another race.
Okay, question: is God all-powerful, all-knowing, and all good? Like, is he all three of those things? And by all good, I mean, like, is he perfectly moral?
Yes, God is all-powerful, all-knowing, and all good, and in fact, none are good but God is without sin, and he judges those who do sin.
See, if God is all-knowing, all-powerful, and all-loving, he should be able to create a race of people with free will, but also will be good people always. And people that won't rape and pillage each other. But he didn't do that. I don't think genocide is necessary. I don't think exterminating an entire planet of people is something that God had to do. And I think if God plays by different rules than us, he should be able to create people that have free will but are also inherently good, that choose to be good. I don't think that exterminating a whole planet of people is necessary. If God is all-powerful, he has options other than genocide. If we entertain the idea that God is real, that Christianity is somehow the one true religion, God is a tyrant, and he reigns with the threat of death, or being turned into a pillar of salt, or plagues being thrust upon your lands. Those actions done to sentient beings is evil, which, I mean, I think the incredible divide of personality from the Old Testament and the New Testament kind of shows some of, well, the fiction in the Bible, because no omnipotent being suddenly has that sudden personality change. Going from an evil, tyrannical, all-powerful thing into a merciful, kind being. It's just impossible. Well, not necessarily impossible, but I mean, if you had more than one writer, that would make a lot of sense.
No, I think you're manipulating the definition of free will a little bit. Free will means the absolute choice to do whatever you want. And if God was to create a species of people that had free will, but they're also controlled and not to do certain things, then that defeats the purpose of free will. That doesn't make any sense. We are judged on the actions that we take in our life on earth so that we are granted everlasting life in heaven. That's how it works. That means if somebody on planet Earth is a murderer, an unrepentant murderer, just goes out of his way, just murders people, on Judgment Day, he is found guilty and he is sent to hell because he is unrepentant for his sins. But the person that he killed is granted everlasting life in heaven. Regardless of the fact that they were killed on planet Earth, they lived a happy and they lived a faithful life on earth, and they are granted everlasting life in heaven. The first time in the Bible that anybody is ever killed, the first human to ever be killed, was the story of Cain and Abel, where Cain and Abel are both brothers. They brought offerings to God. Cain's was out of sin, and Abel's was out of faith. And Cain, his offering was seen as unfavorable by God, where Abel's was seen as favorable. Obviously, Cain was upset about this. He thought he was bringing a good offering, but no, it was a sinful offering. And he was jealous of his brother. And so he lured his brother and ended up killing his brother. Because he was a tiller of the field, but he'd seen cattle be slaughtered. And so he used the same methods to kill his brother. God approached Abel and said, "Where is your brother?" And of course, God already knew. He's all-knowing. He knew that Abel was dead. But what he was doing is he was giving a chance to Cain to repent for his sins. And instead of doing that, Cain said, "Do I look like my brother's keeper?" And the thing is, he was supposed to be his brother's keeper because Abel was supposed to be the Messiah, but he wasn't because he was killed by Cain. But God still gave a chance to a sinner of such magnitude because he's all-knowing and all-forgiving. But Cain turned against him. And that's part of the reason, because the Canaanites who fled from God, he strayed away from God, they formed their own nation. Or not nation, but city. They are the reason that the flood even happened in the first place. God created a perfectly equal and equitable society, and Cain slaughtered his own brother out of jealousy. Where God gave him a chance to repent and be granted everlasting life in heaven, he manipulated it and killed his brother out of jealousy. So I think it's a bit of a manipulation of the definition of free will to say that he could have created a race that had free will, but also could only make good decisions. That doesn't make any sense. I mean, if a race is only allowed to make good decisions, then they don't have free will. God didn't invent murder. God didn't invent genocide. Humans invented them. God gave them the space to act as holy people, and they manipulated it to act as sinners. God didn't invent any of these things, humans did.
I think God would be able to create a race of people that have the option to do awful things with free will, but choose to do good. I mean, apparently he's all powerful, right? I mean, look, I'm familiar with the story of Cain and Abel. Being from the South has its benefits. But, I mean, God being all-knowing, all-powerful, and, God damn it, Dylan, has the options and resources to help people become good. And I'm pretty sure that just because humans did it first, being an all-knowing, powerful being, God knows about murder. And besides, just because humans did it first and do it to each other does not justify wiping out an entire civilization, an entire planet of human people. I mean, if all of the Canaanites were somehow evil, murdering rapists, which, I mean, I'm sure isn't the case because apparently they were killing innocent people, God killed all of them. There's no way that you can justify exterminating an entire race of sentient human beings. Also, back to the homeless person analogy. Yeah, I think those homeless people probably would deserve some punishment. That being said, I don't think that murdering them all is justified, despite the fact that, let's say, all of the good people of the Canaanites who were killed in the flood went to heaven and all the bad ones went to hell. Don't you think that dying in a flood is, I guess, punishment when God apparently is all-powerful, who I think he could help the Canaanites in some way? I mean, apparently God plays by different rules than us. So I feel like he would have the ability to help people choose good and become better people without exterminating them. I mean, it's genocide. He's committing genocide against people. I feel like no matter any way you twist that, it's always going to be bad. You're still killing people.
No, I think that example is a bit flawed in a way to say that, oh, he could have created it in that style, that they had the choice to be good, but in a way they were coerced. But coercion is not free will. It's like the example of vaccines during COVID. They said, oh yeah, you have the choice to take the vaccine, but if you don't, we're going to lock you in your house and you're not allowed to leave. I mean, at that point, you don't really have a choice, do you? You need to go outside, you need food, you need to have a job, you need to feed your family. So in that instance, do you have free will?
Well, I'm not saying coerced. I'm saying he could make them so that they knew to choose good options, to be good people. I mean, I feel like the other option of the Canaanites doing whatever they want, and if they decided to go against the will of God and be evil, they would be murdered. I feel like that's more like coercion, instead of creating a race of people that were strong enough that chose to be good people. I feel like that's way more like coercion. Okay, unrelated question. Well, I mean, moderately related question. What makes you believe that God exists, that Christianity is real? Because personally, I mean, obviously you know that I don't believe in it. But I mean, I want to know your perspective on it.
The reason I believe God exists is because intelligent design is the only way that the creation of the universe makes sense. I mean, you can't have something from nothing. Just think of how perfect our world is set up, right? If we were a mile closer to the sun, we'd burn to death. Every single person on Earth would be dead. If we were a mile further, we'd freeze to death. Again, every single human would be wiped out. It just doesn't make any sense that something from nothing could be created so perfectly that it could create life like this so perfectly. We are the perfect distance away from the sun. What are the odds of that happening? It simply doesn't make any sense to me. And then let's assume that, okay, the Earth ended up in its position perfectly, that we're perfect in an orbit with the sun, we're the perfect distance away. Let's assume that that happened. By the rare odds that it could happen, let's assume that it did happen. Then we have to think about the fact that there are multiple galaxies. And these galaxies are far enough away that they don't collide with us, and they have systems similar to ours. And also, in our very solar system, if some of these planets were even a mile closer to our orbit, it would send us flying out of our orbit, or it would collide with us. Everything is set up so perfectly that it just simply doesn't make any sense. If you told somebody, okay, I want you to take a paintbrush, I want you to slam it against the easel, and I want you to create a perfect copy of the Mona Lisa. They can't, right? Because they don't have the proper tools for it. If they keep slamming on it, they're only gonna get a bunch of blotches. There's no way they can recreate the Mona Lisa. So in that instance, it's implying that it's just for something to explode and be so perfect makes absolutely no sense. Just as a painting can't be perfect by just slamming a paintbrush on the canvas, the universe can't be created so perfectly by just a random explosion.
I think it's funny that you say that because, well, the vastness of space and how large the universe is, which is continuing to expand, life at some point, the odds are it would have to develop. It's so large that it has already, and in other places also has. That being said, specifically here is unlikely, but because of how vast everything is, it's statistically certain to happen somewhere at some point.
No, that doesn't make any sense. If you're closer to the sun, then naturally your planet is going to be hotter. Maybe we won't burn to death from just a mile, but the increased heat affects our ecosystems. It changes entire landscapes. In some areas, trees will grow. In other areas, trees won't grow now. Some areas that were previously infertile are now fertile. Using that example, the Earth would still be destroyed. I mean, if our ecosystems drastically changed tomorrow, let's say that all of a sudden the Earth became 20 degrees hotter on average, and our rainforests just caught on fire and disappeared, we lose a large chunk of our oxygen supply. Would that not be in a way killing us?
I mean, all these within a mile, I mean, it's just not accurate. We travel millions and millions of miles closer and further from different planets and the sun. It's just not accurate. There's so much variation in that. I feel like the 1 mile so perfectly analogy is just not true. I mean, the Earth, proven, gets closer to the sun and further away from it during its orbit. It's not a perfect circle. None of the orbits are a perfect circle. I mean, of course, getting closer to the sun affects our heat, but we also have an atmosphere that's mostly for radiation. But I mean, that is our ecosystem. Getting a mile closer or a mile further away or several or a million, which happens, doesn't kill us. We've been in the cycle of having ecosystems that change for billions of years. I mean, it's just something that happens.
But isn't that also telling of how perfectly our universe is set up? That the Earth, when it orbits around the sun, gets closer and further away, but it gets just the right amount closer and further away that it can still inhabit life on our planet. Does that not sound like intelligent design? How could it just naturally explode something from nothing? And this kind of system, where the Earth will gradually go in and go out as it follows its orbit, how can I reasonably think that that was just random? That doesn't make any sense to me. I also reject the argument that because something is big, there has to be more. I honestly think it's just a lazy argument. I have no reason to believe aliens exist because I've seen no evidence of aliens. Aliens have not visited this planet as far as I'm aware. Maybe they did, but I have no reason to believe that they did. Just because the universe is big does not mean that there has to be more out there. I don't see that as a fruitful argument for there being life on other planets or for there being a perfect society on other planets. That just because something is big, then it has to contain more.
I mean, look, the aliens, not my main point, but we have found planets in other galaxies, I believe. Like, I don't know, I'm not the most educated on alien life, but in the Andromeda galaxy, there are planets that are habitable. I mean, we can look at them, we can't go there, so, I mean, like, there could be life. We don't know. We don't really know. I mean, look, a minute ago you were saying a mile closer or a mile further away we'd all be dead. Now you're saying it's so perfect because there's so much change and we're still alive. I mean, that's not God. None of that is by God. As far as we know, that's from gravity, that's from atmospheres, that's from the right range of habitable life. Well, the heat or radiation or whatever. I'm not going to pretend like I'm an astrophysicist or whatever. But I mean, look, we have science to prove that.
No, using the argument that because we can observe other planets as being potentially habitable is an argument based on faith. I think that people in science don't realize how much of their work is based on faith. I mean, we can say and we can observe these other planets and say, oh yeah, they're habitable. They're habitable for our temperatures, but we've never been to these planets. How do we know that something in our telescope is not just messing up and these are just figments out in space? Maybe if we actually visited there, they'd be a completely different color, or their water would be toxic. Or if you go there, the gravity's just gonna crush you because it works in different ways. We can say that it's habitable, but saying that is an argument based on faith. We have actually no observable evidence that these planets are habitable.
Look, the commonness of habitable planets within what we can see is indicative of life forming on other planets that we can't see because of how often they appear. I mean, we have found water on Mars that is effectively regular water, so we know that it appears on other planets. And you can judge how intense the gravity is of another planet by its size. There are things that we can measure from what we do know, and these planets being possibly habitable might contain life. The common occurrences of these planets, it's indicative of something else being there, some life somewhere existing. That we know for certain. That is something that we can say definitely exists somewhere. Besides, none of that that we know as factual science today is in the Bible. None of it is done by God, and even if it was, don't you think that it would show up in the Bible other than, hey, let there be light, here's a world, here's water now? That's more like the creation of a planet instead of the creation of an entire universe, which we experience every day. I mean, we can see it just from the sky. Well, I mean, the night sky. But I mean, none of that is displayed in Genesis or in Christianity for that matter. None of it is shown or said or even talked about in Christianity.
I don't have my Bible with me. It's upstairs, but it does make reference to creating the universe and the stars. It doesn't go as in-depth as you want it to, because it's a book that's designed for Earth. What good is it to humans if we know about the creation of Saturn? We just make natural assumptions that God is all-knowing, and if he created us, then he created our surroundings to be so beneficial and purposeful to us. After all, God has a plan for everything. We can't explain everything God does because we don't know everything that God does. God knows everything he does. God has a plan for everything, but we don't necessarily always know. I mean, if you were born in Canada and you only lived in Canada, but you were never educated on Canadian history and only told about Indian history, well, what good is that to you? You're not going to live in India. You're never going to live in India. You're Canadian. You're going to always live in Canada. So what's the point of knowing that Indian history? It's not like you're ever going to visit there. It's not like you're ever going to need it.
Well, no, I'm not saying knowing about the stars and all that would be incredibly useful to Victorian people or whatever. But I mean, I don't think the Canadian history Indian analogy is realistic, because living in a world where there is no literal proof of God existing, I feel like in the Bible, having some knowledge that would help people exist tangibly in developing technology and in developing science, trying to make their world a better and more useful place, shouldn't that be something that's put in the Bible? I mean, if it apparently is legit and not just a tool for con men, don't you think that would be reasonable evidence to show that God exists when it's been over 2,000 years since he's been here? This is aside the fact that God is not real and there's no tangible way to prove that God exists. I mean, I agree with Dylan on this. I mean, God could exist. I don't know. The amount of knowledge that we have is so minuscule that there's literally nothing I could say for sure does not exist.
Of course there's proof for God. I 100% believe there's proof for God. If I asked you to just create a rose for me, not buy a seed and plant it, I'm saying I want you to create a rose from nothing and give it to me. You couldn't do it, right? Because you don't have the matter to do it. You don't have the ability to create something from nothing. So if you can't do it, then why all of a sudden is it logical to say that an entire universe so perfect could be created from nothing? Because there has to be something before, right? And it is scientifically impossible. It's a scientific rule. You can't create something from nothing. And it only makes sense for me for the formation of the universe if we're talking about intelligent design.
I'm not necessarily saying that there's definitive proof that God does not exist. What I'm saying is the chances are about 1 billion to 1 that the God that possibly does exist is the God depicted in a Christian faith or in any Abrahamic religion. All disagreements aside, Rylun, I really enjoyed talking about this with you, and I want you to know that despite me sounding frustrated, I love talking about this.
No, I acknowledge it, and I know that you might have disagreements with me, but literally any time you want to talk more about this, I'll do it. My faith is that important to me now. I really want to change myself for the better. That's why I'm doing this, and that's why I have full faith in God now, because I really want to change who I am. I didn't like who I was, and now I want to be different, and that's why I'm changing now. And at any time, I'd be willing to talk about this. So if any time you want to talk to me about faith or anything, I'm always willing to learn. I'm always willing to talk. I'm always willing to hear you out. I know you disagree with me, but I'll be willing to hear out anything you say. I'm legitimately interested in this. So if you ever want to talk about this again, then just bring it up to me. Like I'll talk about it. So thank you for talking to me about this. If you ever want to talk about it again, I'll do it 100%. And I'm actually kind of excited because I'm going to church for the first time with the intention and purpose of like learning about my faith on Sunday. And I can't wait for that, because every single time I've gone to church, I've just like dreaded it. I don't want to be there, or I'm doing it for like family ceremonies or whatever. But this time it's actually because I'm interested in it and I want to learn more about my faith. And I actually can't wait to do that on Sunday.
I think that's really cool that you're going to church for the specific purpose of just enjoying it, you know? Agree with me or disagree with me. Either way, I think that's cool. And I hope it goes well and that you enjoy it and learn and grow. I went to church, well, I mean, technically it was for a funeral, but it almost didn't feel like a funeral because the family member that I was going there for was incredibly old, and we knew she was going to pass a while ago. But there was a lot of communal singing, and I mean, it was entrancing. Like, I kind of understood how people could get inducted into a cult. It was incredible. But yeah, it's late, man. Again, I enjoy talking about this with you so much. Dylan and Rylun, I want y'all to know that anytime y'all want to talk about this, I'm so down. I mean, aside from the fact that I think of y'all as pretty much my second family, one of my favorite things, one of the things that I'm most proud of is that we can have people who talk about that we totally and utterly completely disagree on and still like love each other at the end of the day, you know? That warms my heart, even though I know it sounds corny. Yo, it's your boy back with another